Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. Dyann McDowell, welcome to the show.
Eric Pennington, thank you for having me.
I am so excited. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about how far we go back, which is not an extended, tremendously long period of time, but how we met. And I've wanted to have you on the show for quite a while, and I've been remiss because you know how that goes. You're going along going, why haven't I had her on the show? Why haven't I? So then I reached out to you.
Yeah.
I want to start today, and maybe if you could tell our audience just a bit about what your work is, what you do, what you focus on, and then I'll jump in with some questions that I want to really get your thoughts on.
Sure. So I am in HR. Mm-hmm. I've been in HR for just about 25 years now, and really came into the HR world through training. And my work in training was as a necessity for my clients. What I kept hearing is our training that we're currently doing is bad and it's not working and we need something new. We need something different. And so I would come in, and in the early days I did drug-free most of the time, or I did OSHA training. And I would get clients that would say, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z? And I'd say, yeah, I can do that. And that's just kind of evolved. And so that's really where I began then working in the DEI space. Mm-hmm. And in that space, it was before DEI was popular. And
because it exploded, right? Around
2000.
Okay.
During the pandemic.
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
During the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that was as a result of George Floyd's murder. That whole incident kind of kicked off the fact that, hey, the world is not as inclusive. It's not as diverse. We're not doing what we need to do from a corporate America standpoint.
But again, if I understand you right, you were involved in that prior to.
Long before that.
Okay.
Long before that. From an HR standpoint, I think one of the things about DEI that gets missed is that people only think about race, right? And when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I've always come at it with a slightly different lens. And it's like, how do we make the workplace more diverse so that everyone is included? And we're not just talking about race. We're talking about employees who are handicapped.
Yep.
You know, when we think about DEI, we are thinking about things like ramps. We're thinking about hearing for those who have disabilities. We're thinking about sight. We think about people who are overweight, who need bigger chairs.
Right.
We're thinking about all of those different capacities. And early in this, I had an attorney say to me, you know, when you make changes, and when there are adaptations that are necessary, your job doesn't get easier. It actually gets harder. And I said, interesting. And that was probably 13, 14 years ago.
Okay.
Easily for me. So I've been in this space a long time. And what's always been important to me is understanding that diversity is a fact. Equity is an act. And our work in inclusion has to be exact.
Oh, wow.
And that's what I've always said. If I can look at it from those three questions, then we're doing the work no matter how hard that work is. So I've been in this space a long, long time, and appreciate the changes that we've made in the world at work because of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, what's interesting, and I'm going to get into this as we get further in, your approach to things that are, I consider to be connected to it, but are not necessarily when you utter the word, you would say, oh yeah, that is connected. But I want to stay in the DEI spot because obviously since the election here in the United States, and maybe probably more like the very beginning of the year, once the new administration came in, and I want to be fair to our audience. This is not me saying that it was the current administration that caused all of this, because I think there were some corporations that were starting to pull back, if I can say it that way, as it related to those activities or initiatives. So I'm sure we could do a whole show on debating whether or not that was a good idea or a bad idea.
Sure.
But where I'm going with it, Dyann, is that, okay, if you were looking out on the horizon, considering that what has been done, choices have been made, what do you think the future might look like for DEI?
I think I look at this from a very different perspective, and I have for a long time.
Which I love about you, by the way.
Thank you. So for me, DEI work is not just about DEI. It's been more than that. And I actually have been a critic of some of the way the work has gotten done. And I'll give you an example of that.
Yeah, please elaborate.
After George Floyd's murder, one of the things that started happening that I started noticing in the world and the training and all of that is that people were going in and they were using very divisive tactics. And those tactics were things like, well, this is because of white privilege. This is happening because of white privilege. And their entire presentation would be focused on white privilege. And I, as a practitioner who's certified to do this work, was offended by that. And I was offended not because white privilege isn't real, but because anytime you come into a conversation and it's divisive, you automatically shut down the conversation that's necessary and needed.
Dyann, and I'm going to inject something because it just came to my mind as you were saying that. Both you and I, we're not on video today, but both you and I wear glasses.
Yeah.
So I immediately started thinking, if somebody came into a room and said, okay, people with glasses are the problem and they're the reason why we are not moving forward, I'd look over at you. You'd probably look over at me like, what did I do?
Right.
I haven't done anything.
Right.
So is that, I know that's
it's the same. That's exactly the point. When you alienate people because of who they are, because of what they do, and many of those things they don't have control over, right?
Right.
I have no control over the fact that I'm a black female.
Right.
I have no control over the fact that I'm a lesbian. I don't have those controls. But how I move in the world is based on the combination of those things, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when we look at just the example you gave, what we've basically done is we've alienated people with glasses. And we've said something's wrong with you. This is your fault. And that's so divisive that you literally are shutting the conversation down.
Yeah, because I feel like in that situation, obviously not necessarily just with wearing glasses, I would immediately feel like I need to protect myself. So my walls go up.
Yes.
My defense, like, okay, I gotta protect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing something that then in the background might say, I'm going to go and have surgery to correct my vision. Or I'm going to go and I'm going to make this adaptation in the dark so that I can't fully be myself. So you no longer see my glasses. And so that's what was happening in the industry.
Right.
And I got to a point that I was saying, F white privilege. I'm so sick of this conversation. I'm so sick of hearing it. I'm so sick of that being the focal point because we're missing the opportunity. We are missing an opportunity to really open up the conversation. And for me, by way of training, by way of who I am, by how I live my life, if we're not opening up the conversation, then we're not advancing.
Yeah.
I'm okay with people being uncomfortable in the conversations we have, but we got to have conversations, right? And so the important piece is that that's where the DEI world was headed. And that's why when you come in and say, hey, we're going to do a DEI training, people go, oh, you got to be kidding me. I'm going to get beat up for an hour. That's how it felt. If I'm a male, if I'm white, if I'm privileged, whatever that is, I'm going to get beat up for an hour. And so people dreaded the training.
Yeah.
They dreaded that time. And so for me, when I go into the workplace and I'm doing one of these sessions, it's important for me to say, okay, what's our ultimate goal? We want people to see that all of us have privilege. We want people to see, and if I use myself as the example in this,
right.
And I had a young Gen Zer, this was years ago, who said to me, well, what's your privilege? And it caused me to pause. And I had to literally then think from his perspective. And I thought about things like, okay, I was born into a family that has 4 generations of college-educated Black people. My grandmother happens to be the 3rd registered nurse in the United States as a Black female. And when she got her license, she was 3rd. But education was foundational for my family. And so every male in my family, in my generation and above, are engineers, marketing, teachers, like very educated family, right? And so I was actually born into a level of financial privilege that if I look at my wife, who happens to be white, you would think our stories were reversed. She wasn't born into a family that had the level of education and finances and doors open. So by way of the family I was born into, the question for me was never if I was going to college. It was, where are you going?
Yeah.
Right? It's a different mindset.
Yep.
I lived in an apartment during college, but I bought my first house right after I graduated from college. So my privilege is grounded in the family I was born into. I didn't choose those things. I was
you didn't choose your family.
Yeah, I was just lucky, right? In many accounts, I was lucky. And so my purview has always been, how do we get people to see that we all are diverse?
Yeah.
Whether it's our age, whether it's our race, whether it's our religion, we are all diverse. And that if we first acknowledge those differences, our ability to come together is much greater than if we don't ever have the conversation.
Well, Dyann, and our audience, I don't know, we'll probably start getting emails and instant messages or something about how often I use the term curiosity. It's so powerful, though. And I think about that from the perspective, you were talking about we have to have the conversation, right? I was watching an interview with Cornel West. I don't know if you remember him.
I do.
He's been in many Ivy League schools. I always remember him from Harvard, but he was talking about when he was a graduate student at Princeton in the 1970s. They really were pushing hard for the university to remove Woodrow Wilson's name from this particular school.
Yep.
And I want to say this is not more than a few years ago, maybe less. Princeton, they removed his name. Okay. But Cornel West was against it. And here's why. He says, in 75, we fought and we made the argument. We made multiple arguments about why this man's name should not be on the school because of history. And anybody, you can go to your Chat GPT or wherever and look up the history of Woodrow Wilson beside him being the president at one time. And he said, we made arguments. We went to the president of the university and said, this is why, this is important. He said when they did it a few years ago, They just did it by a stamp. The president said, remove the name. And he said, my issue is that there was no arguments. There were no counter arguments. There was no discussion. It was just done by like fiat,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And what I loved about what he said, though, to Dyann, he said, when we argued in 75, we gave it our best, but we lost. We did not win the argument to have his name removed. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, man, how profound. The recognition is that, yeah, and I would be in that camp. I think Woodrow Wilson has done some things. I mean, wow. Okay, speaking as an African American, but at the same time, I don't want to. We've decided that's gone.
Well, and what you're talking about is civil discourse.
Oh, Dyann, I would almost think you knew I was going to bring up civility, but go ahead. You keep talking.
The thing is that we are going to disagree.
Right.
But we have lost the art of civil discourse. We've lost the ability to say, Eric, I don't agree with your perspective. However, ...
Right.
We've lost that ability. And part of what separates us is that we've gotten so polarized and so opinionated that we have the audacity to want to isolate ourselves, to only be around and have community and conversations with people who lockstep agree with us.
Yeah.
The danger in that, particularly in the world where AI is evolving, is that we're not robots. We don't all have the same perspective. We don't all have the same history. Mm-hmm. We don't all have the same struggles. During COVID, something someone said that stuck with me, and it makes this point, is the statement was made, we're all in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, we're not. We're not in the same boat. We're in the same storm. But
wow, that's really good.
Right?
I get that, yeah.
The boat is different for everyone depending on how you arrived in the storm.
Yeah.
And so for me, I watched 85% of my business dwindle because we couldn't do training.
Yep.
We weren't in person. I watched people who were already struggling to survive literally crumble. We watched celebrities who have money in the bank do their thing. So while it was the same storm, it wasn't the same boat.
Yeah.
Because we arrived differently. And if we can look at people with a level of humanity and a level of empathy,
mm-hmm.
I won't understand your perspective wholeheartedly. But if I can, in any small way, go, hadn't thought about it that way, then the conversation is real.
Yep. And I had this conversation with a client. This is, it's probably been 2 or 3 months ago. And he's from India. And big believer in affirmative action, right? And we had this discussion post that original one where I said I had kind of gotten to a place where I was a little, maybe the affirmative action thing didn't do what it needed to do. Maybe it's not as, I was kind of leaning toward being not for affirmative action.
Okay.
Right? But then he told me his story. And he said, in the area in which I lived, in order to have the literacy rate was so low, you had to walk a mile or so to get to someone who could read.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I was fortunate that I got accepted into a college in India. And he goes on about how some of the scores for people from my area would not necessarily meet the required level necessary. And it wasn't because they didn't have the intellectual capability. It wasn't that they lacked. It was just, I got put here on the earth in this area.
Yeah.
This area is very illiterate, but I kind of overcame that. I'm not going to get the 90%. I got 70. And he said, Eric, why not allow them to enter in? Why not give them a shot? And of course, Dyann, with me, and you know me pretty well, I'm rising up to, man, you got to help somebody out. So I'm thinking, well, maybe, and that's to what you were just saying. I think he has a point. So, but Dyann, notice, if I went to judgment, right, what would I do? I don't agree. I know.
Right.
No. Which is a form of, I will not talk to you. I will not listen to you. And the irony of that is, then we'll go find others in our echo chamber to reinforce the conclusions that we've already said are fact.
Yes, and the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? I mean, at the end of the day, here's the thing, and I have to clarify this, and not because you're equating affirmative action to DEI, but there's a lot of people out there right now who believe that all we're talking about is hiring people who are others, whether it's race, whether it's female, no matter what it is, right? And they are equating that to DEI. That's not DEI. That's affirmative action. They're two very different things. So the first thing that happened when the new administration came in is the new administration was talking about qualified hires, right? And there was this whole conversation with the FAA and whether they were hiring people who were unqualified to do the job simply because of their race or because of gender. Sorry.
Yeah.
And the thing is that as an HR practitioner, I'm offended because the first thing I'm going to look at is, are you qualified? Not what's your race. Are you qualified to do this job? And if you are, then we have other factors that we may consider. That's affirmative action. That's very different than DEI. So DEI came to be as an umbrella under affirmative action, but they're two very different scopes. And so when we look at affirmative action, when I think about people like Supreme Court Justice Thomas, who grew up in a very impoverished childhood, who went to college on affirmative action, right? And one of the things that always offends me is you don't get to climb the ladder and then pull it up so no one else can climb it.
Well put.
And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. People like our current vice president went to Harvard on affirmative action because he was raised in Southern Ohio in a very Appalachia area. His admission to Harvard was an affirmative action box checked. But now we want to cut affirmative action because no one else should climb the same ladder that we climb. Now, whether you leave that in or not, it's up to you.
No, you're fine.
But I'm just going to say, the thing for me is you don't get to climb the ladder and then pull the ladder up.
Well, Dyann, and here's my ultimate point, right? Is when we are not curious and willing to listen to arguments, opinions that are different from ours, or that we may adamantly be opposed to, the damage is done to ourselves, I believe, in a significant way, because I just think that's one of the big problems we have in our society now. We've kind of tossed out reflection, we've tossed out curiosity, and then we've run to our camps, our tribes.
Yeah.
And I don't see it moving a needle in a positive way, right?
It doesn't move the needle. It only allows for people to continue to believe what makes them comfortable.
And Dyann, anything, I won't speak for you or anyone in the audience, I'll speak for me. Anytime I have gravitated or ran after something that was easy and comfortable, it typically ended up biting me in the rear.
Yes. It doesn't move the needle
at all.
It doesn't make us better.
Yeah.
It doesn't make us think. It doesn't make us challenge the norms.
Yep.
It makes us stay exactly where we are. And the danger in that, especially in a time of AI.
Yeah.
AI is doing a lot of thinking for a lot of people. And the problem is that the thing that AI can't do is it doesn't have the capacity for the human intellect. It doesn't have the capacity for the rationalization that we have. We only have that.
Yeah, and I dare say it's not able to capture the emotion-driven outcome, right, that comes from that.
Yet.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to teach it that.
Yeah.
But it can't do that yet.
Yeah.
But at the exact same time where AI is evolving and growing and being utilized in every area,
Yeah.
humans are actually slowing down the same capacity. That is dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous. And so...
Yeah, because you're elevating artificial
Yes.
for the real.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be challenged. We don't want to think differently. We don't want the discomfort. And I'm going to go back to something you said when you were talking about removing the statue or the name.
Yeah, Woodrow Wilson.
For Wilson.
Yep.
One of the things for me is I don't want to live in a world that erases true history. I don't want my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren to go downtown and not see the truth of the world in which we lived.
Yeah.
So if we take it all away, we erase it all, what we're saying is it was all great and wonderful, and that's not actually our history. And so Woodrow Wilson had a history, and that may cause a kid 50, 60, 70 years to go, who was he? And why were people upset? Or why was you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
totally.
so
I totally get that.
it's like the history counts. It matters. It's critical.
Jeff, what is the SEQ Development Report?
I'm glad you asked me that, Eric. The SEQ Development Report is something that we here at Spirit of EQ have developed to blend the idea of emotional intelligence with a person's spiritual life. And we're not talking about religion. We're talking about how they connect with themselves, other people, and the world around them.
Why is it important?
I think it's important because it allows someone to see where they stand, to give them information about maybe parts of their life they may need to work on, parts of their life that they're really doing well and learn to leverage it. And it just gives a person a better way of getting through the world.
So how do you get this report?
Well, first, you need to contact us. Info at Spirit of EQ is just a great way to do it. Then you would take an assessment, 15, 20 minutes, done online. And then after that, the report requires a debrief to go through all the things in it because it's got a ton of information. And then if you want to further your journey, we can do coaching and things like that with you down the road. And that's basically it.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. And we'll be back to the episode after this. And now, back to the episode.
Now, are there some things that actually should have never been, that should have been erased? Without question, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But
so I want to go to the civility issue because I think you've already, maybe without being overt about it, you've sort of established the importance of it. So in your mind, why is it important for civility in this current frame that we find ourselves in, 2025?
I think bad behavior has become the norm. That being uncivil, being unwilling to see others, consider others, and act in ways that are disingenuous, act in ways that really only think about our emotional part of our brain, right? So we see a lot of people who do things the 6 seconds comes in, the logical part of the brain kicks in, and they go, I wish I hadn't done that. God, I wish I hadn't said that. Because we are hardwired for those emotional responses, right?
Yep.
And those emotional responses aren't all bad, but by and large, bad behavior can come as a result.
Well, and Dyann, you used the 6 seconds analogy there, if I can call it that. We don't tell anyone that it's guaranteed that if you make a decision before that 6 seconds is up, it's going to be a lousy one. But if there were studies done, and maybe there are, and I'm just not aware of them, that you probably would find most of the decisions made before that 6 seconds are probably going to be lousy ones, right?
Yeah.
Because you're in that heightened state. You're in that time when your emotions have hijacked and it's roaring. To your point, if you don't allow for and letting that prefrontal part of your brain to catch up to go, oh, hold on, wait a minute. No, I'm not going to say that. Versus I immediately reacted and it's out there. And now my prefrontal's caught up and said, what are you doing?
Right. And the problem is that, when we look at the workplace and we look at behaviors in the workplace, we look at civility. It is now an imperative that we literally teach people how to treat people. It's imperative that we teach people how to approach. We teach people how to have civil discourse. We teach people the rules and norms. Why? Because the behavior's so bad. In the 25 years I've been in HR, I've done plenty of investigations in the workplace. Whether it's sexual harassment, whether it is a hostile work environment, whether it is fighting, you name it, I've covered the gamut in my career. And it's almost always where I'm working with a firm, an attorney says, hey, do you have availability to go in and do this investigation? And if I do, I do, right? And so what I can say to you is I've done more investigations in the last 4 years than I have done collectively in the 25 years of my career.
Wow.
That's how bad the behaviors are. And when you look at the behaviors, you just go, and this is where I was 3 years ago. And I thought to myself, who are we? How did we get here? And now what's the course correct? So the course correct really has to do with civility. The course correct is literally making the workplace foundational so that good behavior becomes the norm instead of the exception. And so when we look at statistics, I read this morning, that only 16% of the workforce in the United States is actively engaged. And 65% of the workforce is looking for new jobs. That's not a sustainable model. We spend more time at work than we do anywhere else. And if I'm disengaged because the culture is toxic, because there's bad behavior that's being allowed, because expectations aren't clear, then I'm in this constant whirlwind of, I can't stay here. I can't do this. My mental health is suffering. I don't have a work-life balance because I can't get this off of me, even when I'm off the clock. And so we have also a generation, Gen Zers. These kids that are under the age of 28 are suffering in record numbers from mental health crisis. And they're suffering because what they thought the world was isn't. No one prepared them for what's really going on. They were raised in an environment where they believe that self is the only thing you got to think about. And now they're living in an environment where it's not just about you, kiddo. You got to think about the people around you. You got to consider all these other moving pieces and parts. And so we've hit this time frame where there's this crash. And we've got to course correct. And from a business standpoint, I'll say this. It's no longer an optional. It's a business necessity.
So no more of the, well, when times are good, yeah, we'll hire Dyann to come and do some great work. But hey, if last quarter's numbers were down, we're not going to do that.
Well, we know, and we know this statistically. Gallup did a study, and what Gallup's study shows is workplace culture in the workplace literally drives production. It drives innovation.
Yeah.
And so at a time where we're saying tariffs are on, we're not buying from overseas, we're going to do it all here. And in order to do that, we got to tick production up.
Yep.
We also have a huge gap in our number of employees because that's been the norm.
Is there a skills gap as well within that? Because kind of, I guess where I'm going in that regard, Dyann, is that what you're talking about, the civility and how to behave, it's a learnable skill.
Very learnable. Okay. Very, very learnable.
That's what I mean by, is there a skills gap there?
It's the soft skills, right?
As called, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that we have to do is we have to normalize the culture at work. We have to normalize that toxic behavior, bullying, is no longer acceptable. And we are going to hold people accountable for their bad behavior.
Okay, so that's a great point. Do you believe we, how I want to describe it by word. Do you believe we tolerated those things when our numbers, when our profit, our expenses, everything was rosy, keen, great, and we just kind of looked the other way? Or do you think there was some element of, I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. We tolerated it, and then now we're paying the price for tolerating it.
You know why we've tolerated it? We've tolerated it because the people, not all.
Right, sure.
So let me not say this is all, but in my experience, the people with the worst behavior are the superstars in the workforce. It's the salesman who sells $3 million a year and everyone else is carrying a $500,000 norm. It's the owner's son who doesn't have the skills to do the job, but who has been promoted in a way that there is a skill gap. It is the individual who is been elevated to a supervisory level who actually doesn't have leadership skills and has never been trained how to engage with employees, how to incentivize employees. They've never been taught that. So what do? If the very top leadership is toxic, you know that old saying, it rolls downhill?
Yeah.
It literally rolls downhill. So if the top leadership is bad and those meetings are gruff and grumbly and go get it done, that puts pressure on the managers and the supervisors. What do? They go to their frontline staff and they're pushing that same toxic energy to them. Yeah. And so we've become so production-like that we forgot it's the humans that are doing the work. And we gotta drive from that perspective, not from the perspective of numbers. And when we do that, I always think about a mountain. So instead of it rolling downhill, if I'm on a mountain, the warmest part of the mountain is at the very top because I'm closest to the sun, right? If I'm on the top of the mountain as the president of this organization, my behavior is going to directly impact and affect the entire workforce. And so it starts with leadership.
Yeah.
It starts with supervisors. It starts at the top, and then we infuse the culture down on the ground, and it's felt.
So you kind of alluded to something that I think is pretty powerful, and that is the overlooked training development, right?
Mm-hmm.
I may be an odd one in this regard, and Trust me, I've been told that I'm odd anyway, so it's not.
I doubt it.
I won't take that personally.
I doubt it.
I almost think there also needs to be training around what happens when you're given power, when you are given power over human beings. Mm-hmm. That there is a very dynamic, live, living thing going on with power.
Yeah.
How to handle power, how to not to abuse power, right?
Yeah.
I would say the same about money. If that person is being promoted and comes you're going up 5 grades, do you understand about what a potential corrosive effect having more can do to you?
Yeah.
Do you understand how? And I think there have been so many times where we've, again, either tolerated or dismissed it, not thinking at that time that it would eventually be an issue. I want to pivot to something that you started to touch on. What's keeping your clients up at night? What are they most concerned about? And I think maybe for our audience, they would say, hey, a lot of what Dyann was just talking about, but are there other things that keep them up at night?
So my client primarily is the HR director, manager within the workforce.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And there's a couple things that are pressure points for them, especially when they have very small teams. So if I'm an HR team of 1 or 2, and let's say I have 100+ employees, payroll probably takes 30% of the time that we actually spend. Ton of time gets spent. And if I'm a department of 2, I've probably got that one person is probably spending about half of their time on payroll because there's a lot in there, right? There's benefits, there is holidays, there's a lot in the payroll. Not to mention the Monday where everyone has to approve payroll, and then we got to get it into the bank by Wednesday so everyone gets paid on Friday. But if I'm a small team, I don't have the ability to do the level of strategic thinking that actually is necessary and needed. And so that's a wake-up point because I'm so busy in the day-to-day that I've lost the ability to think ahead. And as an HR practitioner, our job is to take care of the humans. And I think we, in a lot of ways, think about protecting the business. And we do have to protect the business. It's one of our main responsibilities. But that can't be my number one priority. Because at the end of the day, human resources, I'm about the people. And so I do know that in protecting the business, I've got to protect the people. I got to take care of the people, but they kind of hand glove. Some of the other things that that keep my clients up at night are behavioral. It's the incidents that are happening in the workplace.
Back to that equation earlier about the bad behavior and how to treat people and on and on.
Yeah, because you can't predict when those are coming in the door, right? You don't know when the fight breaks out in the warehouse that your next 3 to 4 days have been derailed. So all the other stuff that you planned on getting done, it's not going to get done because now you've got this thing that you got to deal with, and it's gonna eat up time. And so the other is impact. What impact does that behavior have on the workforce? So let me give you an example. I often say in training, I don't care about your intent. I care about the impact your behavior has had on others. And when you say that to people, they go, what? Here's the thing. I may be well-intended when I run over your foot, but my good intent is not going to stop your broken bones from hurting, right?
Right.
I got to look at the impact that the behaviors have had. And so it's
Can I interrupt you on that point?
Yeah.
It makes me think of the the person, the employee, who intended to communicate a funny story to someone of a different culture, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And it really, really offended. It really, really hurt them.
Yes.
And what's the typical claim? I didn't mean anything by it. I wasn't trying to.
He's overreacting.
Right. Oh, yeah. But back to those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
But I love how you illustrate that, because you may not have intended, but the reality remains.
Yeah.
You damaged. There's damage done here.
And that damage is not just to that person. What about the employee whose brother is married to a Hispanic person? What about the employee whose twin sibling is gay? Mm-hmm. And your joke didn't just offend the person that it was directed at or you were telling it to. It has a lion's share, like a wide impact.
Dyann, I'm also thinking about that doesn't happen in a vacuum, right?
No.
So if you and I are working together and I lay that joke out,
yeah,
you're hurt, you're offended, it bubbles up, right?
Yep.
Whatever.
Yep.
You then are not going to stay quiet. You're not going to say, "Oh, I would never." No. What's going on, Dyann? Yeah, Eric and I. You know that guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, right? And then
get this. There's two other data points out there. One of them, I don't know the exact statistic, but Sharm says that when a individual, and this is from the Sharm Civility Index, that when a person has been the target of incivility, they spend 36 minutes on everything except their work. They're focused on the issue. They're focused on how it felt. They're focused on the conversations with their coworkers. They're focused on everything but their work, okay? Now, 155,000 acts of incivility occur every minute in the United States. 60% of those are in the workplace.
So I've got to ask you, have you cloned yourself? Because you're going to be busy.
It's going to be busy. It's going to be crazy.
Wow, what about that, right? I mean, I guess as you say that, and I want to be fair in the dynamic of kind of even what we were talking about from a curiosity. I would hope, Dyann, that if the person who that joke or that comment landed on, if the person who delivered it realizes, oops, I went too far, I should not have said that. I am sorry.
Yes.
I was wrong. That we would also have that spirit of, okay, got it. You took ownership. We can move on.
And that's the heart of our civility code, right? So what we do is when we're doing training, we're not just saying, hey, you got to be nice. Hey, you can't say these things. That's not okay. What we do is we put a code in place. And the code is not only how do we teach people, but when someone engages in behavior.
And the question is not if.
It's when, right? It's going to happen.
Yep.
What now do we do? So you arm employees with tools. And what you say to them is, as the person who is on the front end, I am the target. I now get to decide what happens next. Am I going to talk to you so you understand why what you said was offensive? Am I going to not talk to you because I don't have the bandwidth? And a cut by, what is that? Death by 1,000 cuts is real. So you may have been the 9,000th person who has said this thing that has been hurtful, and now I'm bleeding out. I don't have the capacity at this moment to teach you why what you did is hurtful.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to give you an example of that, really quick example. A few years ago, we're at home. Our son is an adult, and he's a great human. I mean, as his mom, I look back and I say, we really raised a great human, right? Mm-hmm. He's strong. He's 6'6". He's a good-looking kid, and he is adulting. The doorbell rings, which is odd because our son doesn't ring the doorbell. He's home, right?
Right.
And there stands my son with tears rolling down his face. And I said, "What's wrong? What happened?" He was at work. He was working in the cellular industry at the time. Customer who hadn't paid their prepaid bill, his phone got shut off, and they were being assessed I don't remember what the charge was. Let's say it's a $50 fee to reinstate this phone.
Yeah.
So he's a manager of the store. This guy comes in. He berates him for what he explained to us was about a 30-minute time frame. He called him everything but a child of God. He used the N-word in ways my son at 26 had never heard. And it was a moment where he just broke. Couldn't take it anymore. So as we're talking about this, I said, "It's not the first time you've been called the N-word, right?" And he goes, "It's not." And I said, "So why did this land differently?" And he said, "Because it's become so normal that it actually blankets everything else around me." And it was like, wow. We're doing it so often now that the pain of the moment was the death by a 1,000 cuts, right?
Yeah.
And so what we know, Eric, is that we have to give our employees the tools to deal with the issues when they happen.
Yep.
So that we empower them to take action. We empower the change that's necessary and needed. I love, and I have not done this, but I heard this on a panel, and that is when these events occur, you take the worst possible disciplinary action off the table. And then you sit at a round table with the employee who engaged in the behavior and other employees who were either involved or HR or whatever, and you are forced to give that person perspective of why the behavior is not okay and how the behavior hurts others. It's actually more powerful than the discipline they would have faced had the behavior. If I had just said, "You know what, your employment is terminated, we're done," that person's capacity to grow wouldn't occur. But if they're forced to deal with this almost panel that is designed to teach them why what they did had an impact, that has a long spread effect, right? And so it's things like that. It's tooling the workplace so that people get and grow and know how to treat each other, but then how to recover when bad behavior does happen.
Well, as it has been said many times on this podcast, one of the reasons why we love this work in emotional intelligence is because it's a learnable skill that goes hand in hand with what you've just been describing.
Yeah.
It's almost like, for lack of a better way of describing it, it's almost like when you encounter, and I might have even told you about this in conversations in the past. I'm not the most handy person on the planet. And I'm actually one of those people that when there's a problem around the house, you call somebody.
Yeah.
That's how you fix things.
Yeah.
You fix things by calling somebody who knows how to fix things. So we recently had an issue with our dishwasher, right? And it's funny. And I'm sure, Dyann, if you had a video watching me as I'm trying to approach this problem with the dishwasher, you'd be in stitches. So we had these, the wheels that go on the lower rack when you're pushing in, right?
Yeah.
It was an epic fail. We had to replace them. So I'm excited because I know how to replace these wheel compartments, right? But what I didn't realize as I was replacing them, that this adjustable rack on the inside had to be taken out in order for the wheels to be put back on
Gotcha.
to the new ones, right?
Yep.
Well, I'm not very handy, So then I was faced with, well, how do I get this adjustable rack back? They call it a tine, right?
Yep.
And I'm sticking it in and I'm putting it on the other side, and it just keeps flowing back and forth and back and forth. And there's this little piece, and where I'm going with this, Dyann, if I don't know what tools to use, I'm perpetuating.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to get frustrated.
Yep.
I'm starting to feel a little embarrassed because I'm thinking, you should be able to do this. This is not this hard. Mm-hmm. So all this stuff is starting to generate. However, when it'd be like you, Dyann, coming over and saying, Eric, all you need to do is to take this and that, whatever, place it here, you'll get that adjustable. Oh, that's the tool I need. And that's what I think about with EQ. It's kind of that, oh, wait a minute, I'm about ready to tell this joke. Hold on. Consequential thinking. I don't really know Dyann well enough. She may not, let me wait until I get to know her better, because I'm not going to say something that's going to, that's part of it too, right?
Or let me recognize that what's funny to me is not funny to everyone.
Right. And that may lead to the wholesale change of, hey, look, I got to make sure that I know with certainty that this kind of joke or this kind of comment has the greatest potential to land well, right? And if for some reason, when I make the mistake, I got to own it immediately with sincerity, with authenticity.
Yeah.
Right?
And one of the things I always say is, if my 90-year-old grandmother's sitting in the room and she would be offended, don't tell the joke. Stop the behavior, right?
Right.
If what I'm doing landed on 10 TV news and I wouldn't want my family and friends to watch it,
right,
it's probably inappropriate for the workplace.
What's that old saying about, if the thought comes to your mind that it might, that's a sign that you should refrain.
It's the ought factor.
Yeah.
Right? It's the ought factor. I ought to not say that. I ought. It's the ought factor. And so I think we've lost some of that. And I think someone said to me in a training class a week ago, it's kind of sad that we have to teach people these things. Yeah, kind of is. But it's necessary, because it's not isolated. It's not singular. It's happening in a way that is impacting so many people that if we don't get back to basics, then we lose the ability to be in community with each other and work in an environment that's not toxic.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've always admired about you, is about that willingness and that understanding that I have to go into action. Dyann, I feel in many respects, like you said, isn't it a sad commentary that we're in this place? Well, yeah, it is. But guess what? The house is on fire. You're going to get some water, or you want to just stand around and talk about how it's a sad commentary?
That's it. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to take action. And when I first started doing civility work, I said to my team, I said, you know what? If we don't have a definition of civility, I don't want to do this work. It can't just be you got to be nice. It can't just be you got to have respect. It's at the end of it, it's leaning in, listening, and learning from others. At the heart of it. I mean, there's a whole definition, but at the heart of it, it's the moment we lean in, listen, and learn. And if we can keep that as our forefront, and we're not asking for anything in return, right? Then we move the needle. Then we begin to have the capacity to grow and to be in environments that are good for us instead of environments that are toxic.
Yeah. Wow. I knew this was going to happen. You and I would begin this conversation, and then we'd be facing the clock.
The clock.
But guess what? You're going to come back, I hope.
I will.
You will?
Yeah, I will.
That's awesome. Before we go, though, what's one thing that you're working on that you're real excited about you might want our audience to know?
So right now we are all in Civility Unleashed. I'm going to say this. When when DEI was officially banned,
When
when the word came down and the executive order was signed,
Yep.
I knew it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a moment of shock for me. I knew it was coming. And there was the moment of, okay, 30% of my business is DEI work. Then what's the focus? Well, we had started working on Civility Unleashed last year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a multi-pronged process. We have now finished the Civility Unleashed assessment for the workplace.
Oh, nice.
Where someone can go to the website, they can pull the information up, they can literally answer 30 questions, and then they get 6 category assessment in every particular area affecting workplace culture.
Gotcha.
Civility Unleashed book comes out in the fall, which I'm super jazzed about.
You should be.
I'm super excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations in advance.
Thank you. It's pouring out of a brain that has a lot of noise. And so we're getting it done. It's going to come out in the fall. And then we are all in with training. We're all in with policy development. We're all in with saying this is the way we have to go to get this right. And so we're doing all those things, but it's all Civility Unleashed. It is the passion. It is the part of me that wakes up at 3:00 in the morning and goes, okay, add that element. Okay, do this. I'll give you just a really quick example.
Yeah.
As training, I woke up, my brain always wakes up at 3 a.m. I call it the God-centered moment, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
God's talking to me. It's always between 3 and 3:05. And I'm always like, Lord, can we push back to 5? I'm just asking, but it's always 3:00. So I wake up and I have this vision in my head about a mosaic. And the mosaic, if you think about a mosaic, it has different colors and shapes and sizes. Some of the edges are rounded, some of the edges are jagged. It's just this whole combination. But when you bring the mosaic together, it creates a beautiful picture, right? And if we look at the workplace as a mosaic, the thing is that we appreciate the different shapes and sizes and colors and all the things, and we form this beautiful picture. And so we put together training based on the mosaic.
Dyann, I cannot thank you enough for coming on today.
Thank you.
Love
Thank you
the
for having me.
conversation. It was great. And for our audience, we'll have Dyann's contact information and biography and all that good stuff in the show notes. And we appreciate you tuning in. We look forward to the next time we're together. Take care. Hi, everyone. This is Eric Pennington with the Spirit of EQ. I'm not introducing a new episode today. I'm here to tell you some things that might help you. Jeff, you're with me as always. So
Yes.
How do people get in touch with us?
Well, the best way is just send us an email at info@spiritofeq.com.
That's awesome. Jeff, I was also thinking about reviews, and I'm notoriously bad at asking for them, so reviews on all of the platforms, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
Do you think that'd be good?
I think that would be great because, one, that will help us learn how to make better ones. And it's always good for us
So
to hear.
we're not the perfect podcast hosts?
We're close.
Okay, all right, but
not,
still,
not totally
we want
perfect.
your feedback.
But it also might let us know a new subject. Hey, we need to dig deeper into that.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think.
Cool. We really appreciate that. As always, too, there is social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. Those also have mechanisms or options for you to be able to leave a comment, a like, or those kind of things. Just want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. Right, Jeff?
Right. We appreciate you all.
Thank you. Once again, we really appreciate you tuning in today. One of the things that Jeff and I want to bring to your attention as well is that when we created this podcast, it was not intended to take the place of a clinician. In other words, if you find yourself in a place where there's something deeper going on or something that you cannot solve on your own, we do recommend that you reach out to a clinician of some sort. This podcast is purely opinion-based, and it is rooted in the desire to help you along your path in whatever way we can. However, it is never going to replace, nor should it ever be looked at as a replacement for clinical help in any way. Thanks again for tuning in.